Good evening, everyone. Our church includes many parishioners whose lives relate to war and peace in very different ways. Tonight, I would like to consider how the Catholic Church can help us understand those differences and still work together towards a just peace. As you can see, we have a diverse group of people with different viewpoints on the topic of war. Some members of our parish understand conflict through military service and the responsibility to protect others. A family here with us has a daughter in the Peace Corps who sees the importance of humanitarian service and human development. We have peace activists here as well who emphasize diplomacy, nonviolence, and the prevention of war. I also have a personal story to add to this conversation. A few months after the invasion of Ukraine began, I felt compelled to join a Christian medical mission in Moldova to support refugees fleeing from the war. That experience reminded me that behind every discussion about war are real people created in the image of God. Although our experiences may differ, we as Christians share a desire for peace and the protection of human dignity. Our Catholic teaching recognizes a nation's right to defend its people, but it places strict moral limits on warfare and calls on every person to work towards peace through dialogue, the protection of human dignity, disarmament, and the service to those affected by war. As we continue, please keep this in mind. Christ calls all Christians to become peacemakers, working in love to build peace whenever possible. Gaudium et Spes begins by teaching us that peace is not merely the absence of war or a balance of power. Peace is an enterprise of justice that must be built continuously through respect for human dignity, freedom, and love. The Council also recognizes that governments cannot be denied the right to legitimate defense after every peaceful means has been exhausted, while at the same time the Church teaching respects the duty of military personnel to protect the innocent and also recognizes those who refuse to bear arms for reasons of conscience. Yet, it also places strict limits on warfare. Attacks aimed at destroying cities or civilian populations must be condemned, and the arms race cannot be mistaken for real peace. This means the Church realizes that there are different ways of serving the cause of peace. Whether through military service, humanitarian aid, peace advocacy, or conscientious service, each vocation can contribute to protecting human dignity and building a just peace. War may sometimes be unavoidable, but the Church always begins by calling us to seek peace. Let's talk about just war for a moment. Just war teaching provides moral criteria for deciding both whether going to war is justified and whether the way the war is conducted remains morally justified. So the U.S. bishops developed these principles in their pastoral letter, The Challenge of Peace. They affirm what you heard earlier, that every nation has a right and duty to defend itself against unjust aggression, while the use of war for offensive aggression is not morally justified. Civilians may never be intentionally targeted, and even defensive actions must remain proportionate to the threat. My earlier conclusion about Ukraine reflects this distinction. Ukraine had the authority and just cause to defend itself, yet that does not mean every action taken during the war is justified. Declaring war and conducting battles in war must each be evaluated on its own moral grounds. The Church, therefore, does not simply choose between supporting the military and opposing war. It evaluates the decision to use force and the conduct of war according to moral principles. At the same time, the bishops remind us that peacekeeping is a requirement of all Christian faith. In 1983, the U.S. bishops conditionally accepted nuclear deterrence only as a temporary step towards progressive disarmament. They did not consider it a permanent foundation for peace. Archbishop John Wester explains that Pope Francis has moved the Church towards an even stronger rejection of nuclear weapons. Their possession creates fear and a false sense of security, threatens human dignity and creation, and consumes resources that could be directed to address urgent human needs. The central point for our parish is very simple. The universal church has become increasingly concerned that dependence on nuclear war cannot produce lasting peace. Peace has to grow from mutual trust, dialogue, and serious work towards disarmament. In Evangelii Gaudium, Pope Francis connects peace with human dignity, justice, and the common good. He does not tell us to ignore conflict, as we all know it happens. Instead, he is teaching us that conflict must be faced through dialogue without allowing it to trap or divide us. Unity can prevail over conflict when people are willing to enter a new learning process of understanding each other. This approach is very relevant for our parish. Here we have military members, Peace Corps families, and peace activists who may not agree on every question, but each person deserves to be heard. Dialogue is not about declaring one person the winner. It helps us understand the human concerns behind each position and seeks the common good together. Pope Francis also warns us in Fratelli Tutti that modern warfare makes it increasingly difficult to invoke moral just war criteria confidently. With new technology advancement, missiles, drones, and nuclear weapons can produce far more destruction further and far beyond the battlefield. When leaders manipulate moral language to justify their actions, the theory no longer serves its intended purpose. To be clear, this does not remove the need for moral judgment or the right of legitimate defense by those confronting war. It means that the criteria must be applied in the strictest manner, with peace and the protection of innocent life as our ultimate priority. Francis teaches us that peace is a patient process that is ongoing. It involves truth, justice, mercy, and a continuous renewed encounter, as peace requires relationship building. However, even when defense may be necessary, the consequences of war cause displacement, suffering, and the loss of communities and national identity. Every war leaves the world worse than it was before. What I witnessed in the war in Ukraine was not a theory. Refugees arrived after packing what they could into a single carry-on suitcase, not knowing whether they would ever return home. Many were women with children, the elderly, and those who were sick. Our mission provided medical and dental care, medication, food, water, blankets, and basic hygiene necessities. We also brought the Word of God to those who were in need. And we put our actions into practice, following Christ's command to love and serve God and neighbor. We did not speak Ukrainian or Russian, so we used interpreters to communicate with everyone. Although it was difficult, we developed a common language built on love, compassion, care, and God that brought us all together. It was both joyful and sad when refugees boarded buses as they were granted access to other countries in Europe to their new homes. They were finally safe from war, but their future in the foreign country remained uncertain. However, as dark as it seemed, you could sense that God was at work, even amid the tragedy. It does not simply teach about peace. She seeks to become a community that forms peacemakers. To begin this process, our parish can start by listening to the experience of those affected by war. We can learn the Church's teaching instead of relying on political arguments. We can serve those affected by war with our time, talent, and charity. We can pray for victims, those in service, political leaders, and peacemakers. Prayer should lead us towards service and action. My refugee experience showed me that peace is built when prayer moves us to listen, learn, and to serve. These actions can bring us together in unity with military families, humanitarians, peace activists, refugees, and other parishioners without requiring everyone to have the same experience or opinion. We are called to help and serve all our brothers and sisters for the greater good. I would like to close our discussion this evening by asking ourselves to consider 2 questions to move our church forward. The first is, how can our parish support military members and their families while continuing to evaluate the morality and consequences of war? The second is, what practical actions can our parish take to accompany refugees, promote dialogue, and help build a just peace? Well, that's it. Thank you for your time, and may God give you peace.